We've never seen anything like this. It's the #1 killer in the U.S. for those under 50. Many were minor children. More dead each year than 3 wars that spanned 5 decades. It's everywhere. Stopping the crisis will require unity and leadership.
And welcome to United Against Fentanyl's Thought Leadership Series. My name is Paul Martin, founder and president of United Against Fentanyl. And today we're going to have a conversation with 3 leading experts on the problem of illicit fentanyl and what is a central part of the solution. In the past decade, approximately 500,000 Americans have died of illicit fentanyl or fentanyl poisoning. These are young adults, teenagers, and even young children, less than 5 years old. This means today that there are approximately 1 million parents grieving the loss of their child that died too young. Since I've launched United Against Fentanyl, since last year when we launched, I've spoken to well over 100 of these parents, mostly mothers, whose child's life was taken far too early. And besides the natural devastation and grief, the #1 comment I get from virtually every single one of them is that most parents believe it can't happen to their child. Before I introduce our guests, I would like to share one of United Against Fentanyl's chief initiatives called Walk for Lives, which will be held on Saturday, September 20th in cities and towns across the nation. The mission of Walk for Lives is to provide life-saving awareness, education, and resources while creating sustainable networks and partnerships with private and public organizations, creating resilient communities that can withstand this deadly drug. Each walk is led by a family member who lost a loved one and a team of leaders. Following the walk portion of the morning, there will be testimonials by loved ones and informative talks by experts, followed by a resource fair. Each Walk for Lives will partner with elected officials, law enforcement, hospitals and community health centers, counseling centers, faith communities, relevant businesses, and local influencers for maximum and lasting impact. Please go to walkforlives.org to get involved, to start a walk, or to support a walk. I'm so pleased today to introduce 3 friends who have perspectives that, quite simply, I don't have on this crisis. Debbie Weir brings over 35 years of experience in public health and social advocacy. As CEO of Mothers Against Drunk Driving, she led efforts to combat impaired driving, support victims, and expand services. Later, as Chief Missions Officer at Everytown for Gun Safety, she helped grow the grassroots network of 50 chapters and 8 million supporters advocating for common sense gun safety, things like universal background checks or red flag laws. She played a key role in Moms Demand Action and the Everytown Survivor Network. She's dedicated to saving lives and driving transformational change. Ray Donovan, he's credited for the capture of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. He served as Chief of Operations, overseeing all enforcement operations worldwide. Previous to that, he served as Special Agent in charge of DEA's New York Division, the central office of the DEA for handling the highest level of narcotics, money laundering, and narco-terrorism cases globally. And Harold Noriega is a local, we're in Southern California, Harold's a local real estate executive, and he's a leading broker in the Laguna Hills real estate market. But more importantly, Harold is a father, and 3 years ago, Harold lost his son, Cooper, to a counterfeit pill with fentanyl in it, and we'll talk about this. He has since become a leader in education and awareness through his nonprofit organization, the Coops Advice Foundation. I would love to welcome each of you. Thanks for coming out.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks for having us, Paul.
I want to start, Ray, with you, and I want to start with this issue that we hear a lot about, which is the supply. When we think about fentanyl, we think about fentanyl coming into our country and being sold, and then also substance use disorder. Ray, will you give us a kind of high-level summary of the supply problem?
Yes, so fentanyl or synthetic opioids have really hit the U.S. market. First time it hit the U.S. market was 1991, and it was a domestic lab that was stood up in Kansas. It impacted Chicago, Philadelphia, New York. Very quickly, DEA and law enforcement was able to identify it and shut it down. Then it came up again in 2005, 2006, and it was a lab out of Toluca, Mexico that was identified as being run by the Sinaloa Cartel. DEA was able to locate that and shut it down. The more recent iteration of fentanyl hitting the U.S. started in about 2012. And so from that point on till now, it has not gone away. It's only grown. And so in 2012, 2013, we started seeing fentanyl precursors primarily coming in from China into Southern California and Arizona, being smuggled south into Mexico, converted into fentanyl, and mixed in with heroin. It was called China White in the market then. 2015, DEA put out its first national alert. In 2016, we call it a convergence year because that was really when the market took hold. A lot more fentanyl pills started flooding U.S. cities all throughout the nation. 2017, we took down a second fentanyl lab in Mexico that was run by Chapo's sons. In 2018, we launched Operation Sleeping Giant, which was the focus on Chinese organized crime and their role in fentanyl trafficking. Now, Chinese organized criminal groups have had a long-standing position working with Mexican cartels because of the supply chain for methamphetamine production going back to the early 90s. And so what was happening is we started seeing cocaine markets grow throughout the world. So Colombian cocaine started being shipped to Europe, West Africa. Mexican cartels started losing some of that market. So what was their primary market in Mexico? It was marijuana, it was cocaine, it was methamphetamine, and it had a brown heroin. Brown heroin wasn't good. They had black tar heroin as well, which was strong. And so they lost the cocaine market by and large, or it lessened, and the marijuana market started to diminish because of legalization. And so that left methamphetamine and it left opioids. So the Sinaloa cartel started adding fentanyl to their heroin to make it stronger, to increase their market sales. That led to the crisis that we're in to this day.
Wow. I have so many other questions I'd like to ask you, Ray. But Debbie, we were in a call a few weeks ago and you joined some of our parents who are organizing these campaigns around the country. And I won't forget you saying this, something to the effect of, we knew with Mothers Against Drunk Driving that this was a preventable crisis. Mm-hmm. And you said you believe that this is as well. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, and it gets into some of the macro issues, I think, of the issue. And I just want to say, number one, thank you so much for founding this organization. I think it does take a national organization that is very focused on this mission. There's many organizations around the country that are especially family members coming together to support each other and to see what they can do in their local community. But the power and magic of MADD was you have the national MADD organization and then chapters all around the country, all focused on the same goals, right? And then all boats will rise from that. So, you know, every time a drunk driver or a drug driver gets behind the wheel, that's a choice that person made, and it's 100% preventable every single time that there is a substance impaired driving crash. When I look at this issue, which I'm definitely not an expert on fentanyl or what's happening with supply, but I really do believe when we think about people who are suffering from substance use disorders and the stigma attached to that, which means people are not getting the help that they need, then that could be more preventable, right? If someone's having that issue, and then they're able to get help and they're able to get treatment. It's very treatable. There are so many issues with insurance and not enough insurance coverage, and not enough services available. But, I really believe we have to destigmatize, and that it's okay to say, I am suffering and I have substance use disorder, and be able to get that help. But I also think from a grassroots organizing perspective, it really does take a look at, here's what the problem is and what are the different facets that we have to attack that problem, right? Whether it's policy, law enforcement, what's the courts doing about it, and then also the education and raising public awareness. And that's what's so exciting about the walks, is that everywhere that walk is going to occur, that is your greatest public awareness tool that you have, where people are coming together in those communities. Because when we first met, I was astounded and did not know that fentanyl poisonings, overdoses, are the leading cause of death for people between the ages of 18 and 45. That's more than gun violence, it's more than drunk driving crashes, it's more than cancer, it's unfathomable, and I don't think the public at large really understands those devastating numbers.
Yeah, well, thank you. And Harold, we met for the first time about 2 months ago, and your son was taken, Cooper, and I say to these parents every week that despite experts like Ray and others that we know as mutual friends, nobody knows more about this issue than you and the other parents who have lost a child. Take us through, I know there's so much that you can say, but take us through just a bit of the journey that you went through with Cooper, and then what you've been doing for the last 3 or so years, if you could.
Sure.
Just summarizing that.
We, our family, my wife and I, and we have a now 27-year-old daughter. At the time, Coop was 19, and he was about 2.5 weeks away from his 20th birthday. And we're a family that was very close, very open, very communicative, spent a lot of time together. It wasn't a drug family. It wasn't like we had a kid that was suffering through addiction and in and out of rehab and, problemed and all of that. Our son was a successful and famous social media influencer, and had a, as we found out later on, it was just on the horizon of a lot of opportunities, and a successful career in modeling and brand advertising, and even some acting roles. And like all other kids and people, everybody struggles with something. And today, we're almost 3 years since his passing, and I have to frame this because this journey has been, I tell it like this: a bomb goes off in your family, and the collateral damage is, it's just, think of it like a bomb literally goes off. There's an arm, there's a leg, there's blood. You're completely shattered, and you don't know what happened, what's going on, and you're immersed. You get a call that your son's passed away. Coop was, we call it like a perfect storm. He had experimented with drugs before. He had done drugs. He had some problems with drugs, and his drug of choice was Xanax. And I also have to frame it today, which is how I frame everything today. And this is basically from about the last 6 months or so. If I knew then what I know now, things would be, we would have acted and behaved and done things differently. But as parents, you just don't know. And I've heard of fentanyl. I've heard of people dying from fentanyl. I didn't really know what it was. I had a clue of what it was from a clinical standpoint, like from end of life pain medication and treatment. I knew nothing about counterfeit pills and cartel involvement. I felt cartel was like cocaine and marijuana that I saw in Narcos, right? Right. And so we learned that on that evening, I talk about a perfect storm. Coop's best friend, as a recording artist, was on tour, which he had been with his girlfriend for over 2 years, and they decided to take a break, and they were living together, and she had moved out. And one of the things I knew about Coop was that he just didn't like to be alone. And so he was struggling with anxiety and depression, and those are kind of like these words that are used, anxiety, depression, they seem like these catch-alls. But if you look at it, we all kind of suffer with all of this. And it's really a matter of like how you choose to deal with when you don't feel well about something. I remember we were on a trip at Greece. He was probably like 9 years old. And I don't remember this landing, what everybody said. It was kind of rough. I go, I've been through some rough landings. I don't remember that at all. But it really affected him. Mm-hmm. And he had a fear of flying. We got home. And it bothered him. And then he got prescribed a Xanax to help, calm him down. Mm-hmm. And with some people, it clicks. He liked it. So as he grew older, when he felt it didn't feel right, that was his go-to. Mm-hmm. On that night that he passed away, we found out that he was on his way to a Bible study in Burbank. And he had been taking Xanax prior to that, but wanted to get off, and tried to taper and detox on his own the previous 3 days. If I knew then what I know now, you can't taper and detox off Xanax or alcohol without medical supervision. Those two particular drugs, you could actually die from it.
Yes.
And so what we all kind of gathered was that he wanted a Xanax to help him get through, kind of like, let me get through this. I think that's how the compromised mind works. So he went to someone that someone who was a friend assured him or recommended that this guy was okay. He met this guy who was getting his hair cut in a mall in Burbank, and got it from him, and Coop didn't make it out of the parking lot. And it was all fentanyl. Mm-hmm. We found out 6.5 months later. Wow. And so initially the coroner had reported it as an accidental overdose, and since then there are 6 people in federal custody related to his death, 2 particularly accountable for his death, that distribution, et cetera, that results in death. Awaiting trial in August, upcoming. And so we're also trying to change the vernacular that these aren't overdoses, these aren't accidental, these are fentanyl poisonings. Mm-hmm. Especially when you have people, that 6 of them that would be accountable for this. Oh, wow. So since then, been thrown into this space like tossed off a boat in the middle of the ocean, had to figure how to survive and swim, but also felt, because of Cooper and God, that for some reason we're led that there's things that we need to do to help as much as we can other parents to avoid experiencing what we've experienced. I don't know why, but that's the space we're in today.
Wow.
Thank you for all that you're doing. And I just want to say, you said this over and over again, it's those coulda, woulda, shouldas, right? Like a parent cannot protect their child 24 hours a day. We're not with them all the time. And those coulda, woulda, shouldas can really weigh you down. But that's probably also your motivation why you and your family are doing what you're doing, too.
Well, my son was in a space, it's a social media space, where he had several million followers, and he created a space right before he passed away on the Discord platform, where still today there's a little over 174,000 kids on that daily, sharing their feelings about addiction and mental health. And it's interesting. What taught me is like they're looking to speak to someone, and who do they talk to? I know that it's not easy to talk to your parents. And like I said, we had a great relationship, but I've learned this. Your kids will tell you on the best day, on the best relationship, 99%. Yeah. But they're not going to tell you that one thing because they don't want to disappoint you and hurt you. Mm-hmm. But they need to talk to somebody. And it's not always a therapist or a doctor or an adult, but they're talking amongst themselves in this space. and they're getting love, hope, and encouragement. So it's showing us how much of a need that is. So as much as we can communicate to others, maybe it helps other people make different choices, and so the bomb doesn't go off in somebody else's family.
Right, yeah. You know, it's interesting. One of the things that we've learned with United Against Fentanyl, and Debbie, you touched on it, despite heroic, unrelenting, unbelievable work by public entities like the DEA, One Pill Can Kill, the CDC, private, state, parent groups, Super Bowl ads, still overwhelmingly, most people do not understand this. Ray, speak to the laced into other pills part of this, because that's something that so many people are confused about. Cooper thought he was just taking a Xanax to get through his, but it wasn't Xanax. Why would the cartels do this?
Right. So first time we saw fentanyl pills was in September of 2015. A plane crash in Yucatan, Mexico. There was 27,000 fentanyl pills.
That's a lot.
Never saw that prior to that. And so
were these the M30s?
This was the M30s. They were different colors, but it was the first time we've ever seen it. Was that instance. Now, from that point on, fast forward to 2016, we started seeing millions of pills. So what was the reason behind it? The reason behind it was money. It was so lucrative. At that point in 2016, one pill could be sold for $30 in places like the Northeast. Today, one pill is $1, right? But that kilo cost about $3,000. And so if you could turn that kilo into 250,000 pills, you're making a lot of money. So for the cartel, it was clearly a business model, right? But we think, and I think our investigations, operations have proved it, that this was intentionally done. Not only by the Mexican cartels, but by the Chinese government. We know last year testified before Congress in April, where we openly said, as part of a 6-month investigation, that the Chinese government, PRC and CCP, was subsidizing the exportation of fentanyl and fentanyl derivatives into the United States and into Mexico for distribution. Now, it hasn't stopped to this day. So when we say that this is intentional, it isn't. It's clearly intentional, but it's not just the most obvious. It's not just the Mexican cartels. It's also China. And so why? First of all, from a Mexican cartel perspective, it's money. Unbelievable amount of money. They're not depending on crops.
Right. It's easy to
weather.
produce.
Right. It's so easy, synthetic, limitless supply of chemicals. The turnaround is so fast. The money is so lucrative for them. And the market's here in the United States. But behind them is the Chinese organized crime in Mexico, but also the Chinese government.
And why would they put fentanyl in a Percocet, a Xanax, an Adderall? These are pills that you would not be able to tell. Cooper did not know the difference when he got the Xanax. It looked exactly like a Xanax. I've had so many people ask me this.
Sure.
Are they just trying to murder people?
Right. Well, I mean, again, what we saw is this. It goes back to what I said when we first started talking about. They lost the cocaine market, right? By and large, cocaine went worldwide, and so they had the meth market already. So they had a stimulant. By the way, they started pressing meth into Adderall pills, fake Adderall pills, and selling them as if it's an Adderall. It's not, clearly. Well, same thing now. You have a depressant. They started pressing the pills into opioids. What we saw is the convergence was we saw these historical people that were using pill mills. Like they would go doctor shopping and look for prescribed pills. We saw the convergence between that group and then historic heroin users starting to converge on fentanyl. What happened, because of social media and also technology, the ability to market very quickly to people's phones, to kids' phones, is that it started going on to other drugs, where Xanax or Percocet or Oxy, but it was all fentanyl. All of it was fentanyl. A small portion was meth, but by and large it was just fentanyl, different colors. We saw them marketing it as if it was candy, actually putting colors as if it's candy, and smelling as if it's candy, and putting it in packaging as if it's candy. And this is all from the cartel. And so what has been the vehicle for distribution? Social media. So historically, you'd have to go to someone who is selling that specific drug. It's gone now. Now you can go online and literally have it delivered to your doorstep.
Yeah, there's so many cases like that, but one of our organizers in Leavenworth, Kansas, it's a harrowing story. His 14-year-old, you've heard this story 100 times, right? Different than Cooper's. This was a normal 14-year-old doing what we might have done when we were 14 years old, like dad's gone, I'm going to have a shot of whatever he has, right? Kids play around, they experiment. So he went on Snapchat, he bought this Percocet pill, then he proceeds to go on FaceTime with his buddies to show himself, hey, look, I'm going to get high. Kid never took a drug in his life, and proceeded to die in front of his friends.
It's unbelievable.
On face.
And that's a story that's been told from different people time and time again.
Yeah. Debbie, when you think of, I'm just curious, I've never asked you this question, but when you hear this part of it, where does your mind go? Because we're talking about something so different. And I just, before I ask you, I need to say to those watching, there are essentially two types of deaths, if you will. There are people that, when I got introduced to this in New Mexico, there are fentanyl users. They know they're using fentanyl. They don't use heroin anymore. Fentanyl's an opioid. It's cheap, it's accessible, it's a great high. And so you have this population of millions of people using fentanyl now in the same way people used to use heroin. But then you have this other group that is experimenting. They're kids being kids. And then you have a group kind of in between, people that have struggled to a degree with substance use disorder, like Cooper, but they weren't living on the streets as junkies. We don't call them that, but people would. Or they're not like this boy Cruz, who just was trying a pill for the first time. They're in between. But where do you go when you hear about the complexity of this?
Yeah, well, even when you think about, at MADD, the mission was to end drunk driving, but it was also to prevent underage drinking, right? Because 4,500 young people under the age of 21 die every year due to underage drinking, like alcohol poisonings, falling, hitting your head. That education is so important. So two buckets, I would say. Number one is, this is a nonpartisan or bipartisan issue, right? Everybody should care about this. It's not controversial at all. It is, here's the data, here's the dying. So I think one is, what are you doing from a policy perspective? How are you working with law enforcement so arrests are made? What's happening through the court system? The other is culture change and behavior change. That's where the education comes in. So at MADD, for example, we were talking about underage drinking in the school system starting in middle school, right? And then we had a program developed at Penn State University by Dr. Robert Teresi that was called The Power of Parents. Like, parents, how are you talking to your kids about this? What kind of parent are you? There's different kinds of parents, different communications. If you're authoritative, this is how you can talk about it. If you're more laid back, this is how you can talk about it. But I really think it takes the school systems, the teachers, the coaches, whoever those adults are in our kids' lives need to be talking about this. Because one pill kills people.
And they need to be educated.
Yes,
because even the teachers and the parents. I'm still amazed how many adults with kids have no clue about this. I just don't really know the degree of what I called the minefield. It's a minefield. And it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And they just don't know. So I'm not trying to be condescending about it. It's like, hey, wait a minute, I'm trying to be cautious about it. Let me help you understand this because it's that serious. I think kids are starting to understand this now. They're getting fearful of it. But we've got a long way to go.
Okay, so on that, and I'm thinking of this as I'm speaking it, stigma-wise. My kid is on drugs, stigma. My kid drinks at parties with friends. There is a problem there. But I want to say, I want to ask you something. MADD changed culture. Today, I have 3 kids in their 20s. When I wasn't a big drinker, but when I was a teenager, a lot of people drank and drive, and I think we all would recognize that. Nowadays, the teenagers do not drink and drive overwhelmingly.
They have Uber.
They have
Unless
Uber.
they're in
Right.
They
rural
drink and get
communities.
driven.
Unless they're in rural communities where there is
But
no.
but MADD really did.
Yes.
How did they do that? How did they nationally change the narrative around drinking and
Yeah,
driving?
I would say back then, which MADD was founded in 1980, I joined them in 2002, but
Right.
there is what we called back then, MADD had a roadmap, and here's the roadmap, how we're going to attack this. Now people say playbook, right? So the
Right.
playbook.
Right.
It is, again, what are you doing policy-wise, right? And then what are you doing in local communities? And that's where the organizing and building that grassroots, it's building a movement. MADD built a movement that now 50% less people are killed in a drunk driving or a drug driving crash, right? So it's like, what are you doing locally in communities? What are you doing at the state level? Is this on the list? Is this on the top 5 list of governors, mayors? And then federally, you have to do local, state, and federal. And raising the issue up so that everybody can focus on it. Because, you know, our legislators, governors, mayors, police chiefs, senators, representatives, they all have competing priorities. Like, there's a long list of issues that
Right.
America is suffering from. Gun violence is going up and, the economy. So how do you raise it up enough that then everybody is focused on it? And it is on that list of, yes, we need to focus on this.
And MADD had a walk, I think.
Oh, yeah, we had a walk. MADD has a walk called Walk Like MADD. And again, lots of nonprofit organizations do walks. It helps to raise money. Your walk is not about raising money this year, right? It's about raising awareness.
Right.
And I'll say the other thing, and I think about you, and I'm looking at you, and thinking about your wife and your daughter too, but MADD had those victims and survivors, the bereaved family members, loved ones, those who were injured but survived, coming together. And when you go on Capitol Hill or in Sacramento, and you have loved ones carrying pictures of their kids, their loved ones, to say, I don't want this to happen to anybody else, right? And I'm your constituent, and this needs to be a priority for you. And then to Ray, what is it that we can do? Like, how do we break that supply chain, right? That's a different issue than with alcohol. It's legal, right? But then also in changing the culture, it's like, how do we talk to the restaurant associations? How do we talk to bars, taverns about, do you train your staff? Do they cut somebody off? I mean, all of that education also helps to change that cultural change over time.
Ray, you told me, and I think you said it again today, when you were in D.C. and you guys are getting this information about this new drug coming in, and
Right.
that's your DEA, and you put out a memo or a wire to all law enforcement.
That's right.
Marshals, cops, sheriffs in the U.S. That's been a decade.
That's right. Yeah. So 10 years ago.
Why are we not further along in people having awareness? I know there's not a golden answer, but you were spearheading this a decade ago.
Yes, I think it's because, certainly from federal law enforcement perspective, we were attacking the supply chain. And what we realized was that wasn't enough. So in 2022, we launched the Family Summit, which was nonprofits, really because we realized that, hey, we're working from a deficit. We have to try to get mobilized. To your point, Debbie, about really changing the culture. Once we did that, it started growing nationally. And I think we're not there yet, but certainly more people are aware of the dangers. Not enough, because there's plenty of people, to your point, Harold, about, I speak to parents all the time, they have no idea. And kids certainly may be looking for Xanax or Percocet or some other drug, not really understanding the dangers behind that is probably fentanyl, right? If they're getting it and it's not from a doctor or a pharmacist or a nurse practitioner, they're getting it from the dark web, or they're getting it from social media, it's going to be illicit. So more than likely, it's going to be fentanyl. And so the issue with that, to go down the rabbit hole, is that that's in everyone's household. Everyone has a phone. Everyone has access to that.
Right.
And so you have dealers that are basically victimizing vulnerable people, vulnerable population. And I think that really was a turning point, certainly for DEA and other law enforcement, saying, hey, yes, we're going to stay hard and fast on the supply chain, but know that we have to educate the public.
It's interesting because when we first spoke, just about a year ago, Ray, I hunted you down. I saw that hearing, the China Select Committee, which, by the way, for people that are skeptical about our elected officials, and there's reason to be, that's a committee that's doing the most phenomenal work in the most bipartisan way.
Right.
And you know these people very well, but I'm humbled to drop in virtually and read about the phenomenal work they're doing, again, in a fully bipartisan
Is that
way.
continuing now still?
Yeah.
Good.
Chairman Molinar, but I mean, Republicans and Democrats all in
Great.
on understanding China, who plays the central role. And a distinction for anybody listening that doesn't know it, it is the Chinese government. They have an authoritarian leader, Xi Jinping. I did an interview with Ray. He could shut it off today because he's an authoritarian,
Right.
and he could simply say stop. Of course, he doesn't. In the case of Mexico, it's far more complex because it's not the Mexican government. It's two of the largest criminal organizations. Agree with me on
Right,
this.
the Mexican cartels, right. But I do think, Paul, that the designation of foreign terrorist organization is going to change the landscape.
That was going to be my next question. And
Yeah.
so you have, Ray, you do have folks on one end of the political spectrum that's going to say, it's all about harm reduction, and it's all about mental health services, and it's all about a social safety net. It's got nothing to do with supply. I've had people say this to me.
Right.
They have others on maybe the other side that would say it's got nothing to do with those things. We need to bomb China or Mexico or whatever.
Right.
You're in concert with UAF's charter, which is it's both.
It's
Yes,
both.
It is both.
And there are no
100%
silver,
it's both.
Yeah.
no silver
They're
bullets.
both equally, need equal attention, because it's and I'm just simplify it, the mental health aspect, it's the layer below someone choosing to take a drug or a drink or whatever that vice might be. It's why. Why are you choosing to do this? When we talk with kids who are struggling, we don't, our platform doesn't take the Nancy Reagan position of don't say no to drugs.
Say more
and don't
about that,
do
Harold. We talked about this
Yeah,
at Zinc.
we don't do that.
Why?
Because it doesn't work. Because if I tell you not to do something, I'm really kind of pushing you to go do it or be rebellious. Well,
Especially when you're 15.
especially when you're any age.
Yeah.
I've dealt with this with adults. So, in fact, I had a phone call yesterday with a 22-year-old who was a very close friend of Cooper's. And the conversation we had was basically this. And this is the conversation. I want to empower people, no matter what age it is. And when they're younger, I'm going to speak to them like an adult, because they have to make the choice. We can't be there. No matter how much helicopter parents we're going to be, we're not going to be there every time to go, you shouldn't take that. You can die from this. They're going to feel peer pressure. They're going to feel, I think what happens with a lot of people, their judgment gets compromised because whatever position they're in, either they're hurting physically or they're hurting emotionally, mentally. So you look at it and you want to explain to them the danger of it so they understand. What are the chances that if you took something that is not 100% bona fide by you from a pharmacy or from your doctor? In other words, if your mom gave it to you, she's got the prescription, you're probably pretty good versus you got it directly yourself. But what are the chances that it's something that, like, let's say, talk about the MADD world. What are the chances if you took that drink that you're going to die? Just from the drink, not by getting it from the car. It's a 50 to 70% chance that you're going to die from fentanyl poisoning if you take something that's illicit. 50 to 70%. So you have a 30 to 50% chance you're going to live. So if you understand this, then I'm not going to say, are you kind of like, dumb for taking this? So why are we at this point where you might want to choose to do that? Because very simply, you have the choice to make a negative and an unhealthy choice or a positive and a healthy choice. And what does it stand to reason that as we talk, that maybe the healthy and positive might be better, because there's not a 50 to 70% chance they're going to die from just playing over in this minefield. So we want to empower these kids and people so with the awareness of it, so they can make hopefully a positive, healthy choice. Because even if you do that and you don't do drugs, you don't drink, you don't abuse yourself, life's still going to throw crap at you. Somebody might go through the red light and hit you and kill you.
Right.
Your parents are going to die. You might get cancer. I mean, this is on this side of life. Over here, you're just piling it on yourself. But then let's talk about why you feel this way. And this is where the mental health aspect is really the underlying cause of all this. We have to rethink and relook how we treat it. If you broke your arm, you're going to go to a doctor. If it's your knee, you might go to an orthopedic. But if you say, I feel depressed and I got a lot of anxiety, I might have suicidal thoughts.
Yeah.
What's wrong with that
So
person?
summarizing what you're saying, Harold, obviously you're in agreement that someone shouldn't take a Xanax, but you're saying the approach, the old school approach of you shouldn't do this, you might die, don't do that, it's irresponsible, is not as effective as a method as, don't you want to make choices that are positive in life?
Yeah, and the thing is, you have to have the conversation over and over again. You can't be like, check the box. I talked to my child about the danger of drugs or the dangers of underage drinking or unprotected sex, right? It's like, it should be an ongoing conversation. And I think that's where the stigma comes in, right? So even in school systems, when a student dies, like nobody's really talking about it. And with these fentanyl poisoning deaths, it can be months before you know that's what your loved one died from.
It's usually about 6 months
Yeah,
for the
yeah.
tox screen to come
Yeah,
through.
yeah,
But
yeah.
you talked about it really begins with communicating.
Yes.
And in environments, and having that communication, like what you said MADD did.
Yes.
From like your teacher, your coach,
Yes.
your parents, everyone, so that it's okay to talk about this. And they're empowered, and those mentors are educated to understand what the landscape is. And that doesn't mean you're going to be their therapist, but there might be other things that you may want to try instead of this. Like I see in my son's world, a lot of his close friends and the artists and the influencers, they were affected by his death, and they changed their life. They stopped smoking weed. They stopped drinking to getting drunk. They stopped doing the drugs that they were doing. And now they're all either journaling, making content, working out. They're choosing to do positive and healthy things, and the kids that follow them are starting to do those things. And it's like, there are a lot of different choices. Like, I survived my childhood from sports. There's so many things, music, writing.
Right.
I mean, it's about how we're going to approach this. And it's like, I really believe that you can make a difference. You can choose differently, and it can be a better life for you. But it takes a village.
Yeah, I think the issue is this. When you think about it, kids today, you grow up taking pills, whether it's aspirin or some other pills, so you get accustomed to that, right? So the cartels and drug dealers and that whole industry has really, they got smart for marketing. When you look at a fentanyl pill, it looks better than a pill that was made in a laboratory. Same color, press, everything. So that stigma that was once there with heroin, cocaine, or powder.
A bong.
Right.
Or,
It's
paraphernalia.
Laying out with a needle in your arm.
Needle,
Right. So
That's not happening.
That is gone because of it's in now pill form. And so a lot of these kids think, oh, it's pill. Okay, yeah, I've been taking pills my whole life. It's not a big deal. I'll just do this. Totally unaware. So it goes to your point about knowledge, knowing the dangers, right? They're going to make a decision one way or the other. But the more that they know that, hey, there's a great chance this is fentanyl and that this can cause tremendous harm, it's not kill you, then I think that's what really needs to get out. That's the message that really needs to be
You
conveyed.
touched on it earlier, and when your question about why is fentanyl and all this, I mean, it is. It's about economics. It's about business. It's about money. But fentanyl's so highly addictive, Why would they put it in pills like these kids are going to take. They put in the form, like you said, because it's an accepted form. Yeah, they're accustomed to it. But you're finding it now in Adderall, vape cartridges, weed, anything that's basically contraband, you're finding it. But why, if it has a higher percentage of chance of killing somebody from 50 to 70%? Isn't that bad business if you're killing it? No, what they look at it is because it's so highly addictive, it's the cost of doing business.
Return
If we
customer.
lose, 7 to 5 people, we still pick up 3.
Yeah.
That's an insane.
Talk about the
Well, I
return
mean, it's a return customer thing. So what you said, Paul, about there's a certain community that looks for fentanyl. They're looking for powerful fentanyl,
Yeah, absolutely.
right? And so if they hear about someone that has overdosed, they'll look for that, especially someone who is looking for fentanyl. So it draws them back. So it's return customers, especially someone with a long-term addiction to it. And the cartel is willing to pay that price. Of course they are. They can care less.
They don't care.
They don't care about humanity. It's about money, control, power, period.
I've heard this over and over, and it seems so counterintuitive. And I cut my teeth 2 years ago in a small town in New Mexico learning about this, and the users would describe how quick it hits, because heroin takes 20 minutes, fentanyl 3-4 minutes, it's there, how powerful it is. It's kind of like if you're an alcoholic and you're drinking straight bourbon and someone hands you a Michelob
It's
Light.
like a shot.
Yeah, you're just, it's not going to get
White
you
lightning
there.
shot.
But that point, Ray, and this seems counterintuitive, but if your dealer, you were maybe addicted to Oxy during the pharmaceutical crisis that we had, and you're getting Oxy, and your dealer's now giving you Oxy that's got fentanyl in it, but a buddy gets some Oxy that's more powerful,
Right.
you're going to go buy it from the other dealer.
Absolutely.
And this is such a massive issue that I hear about all the time. People think the cartels just want to murder people. No, if you have a dealer that's got better stuff, you're going to go buy from that dealer.
That's right.
And that's such a huge part of this. Ray, I want to talk to you just quickly because, of course, fentanyl is a kind of a species that is the synthetic drug transformation that the
Right.
globe's going through, which is a species of the genera, which I was in New York City the first time, Ray, I met you, and I said, sum it all up in one sentence. You said, I don't need one sentence. I got one word, corruption.
Yeah.
So can you very quickly, I know there's a lot to unpack,
Yeah.
talk about the money laundering, the corruption,
Right.
and the synthetic, and maybe we'll break that into 2 questions. But the listeners honestly need to know about this because fentanyl is just a little part of this problem, as you
Right.
know.
Well, it is. And so what's the real issue behind the Mexican cartels is corruption. It's corruption at the local, state, and national level. It's the same thing in China. It's corruption. So in China, you have members of the CCP that are on boards of chemical companies that are producing fentanyl for exportation directly to the United States. In Mexico, you have cartels directly affiliated with politicians, with military, with police agencies. So corruption is the backbone to this industry, certainly as it relates to the production in Mexico and in China. Unbelievable amount of money, billions and billions of dollars flowing back to China and back into Mexico. And what we've seen really in the last 15, 20 years is that coordination between Chinese organized criminal networks working very closely with Mexican cartels, specifically Sinaloa and CJNG. Those two are the biggest, most powerful cartels. Sinaloa controls, by and large, the U.S. markets for drug trafficking, but CJNG is not that far behind them. Who does all the money laundering for those cartels?
Yeah.
Chinese groups, all across the United States. And it's a growing problem. The U.S. hasn't put enough emphasis and focus on that problem. And I think we're further and further behind.
And with some of the recent changes in the last 3 months or so, we talked about tariffs. We also talked about WMD, which is something completely different, but terrorist organizations. Can you talk more about how, I forgot to ask you, you have seen a causal relationship between supply, and you talked about China in, when was it? During COVID,
Right.
to talk about that. When you reduce supply, you see a causal relationship.
Right. So what happened during COVID, early when COVID hit, is we saw a stockpiling of fentanyl, pretty much every drug in Mexico. We saw the stockpiling because the border was shut down and the states were shut down. And so what happened was the price started going up. Why? Because in China, in Wuhan, that was the primary province where we were seeing a lot of fentanyl production taking place or precursor chemicals taking place. They shut down. So that correlated into Mexico and directly into the United States. And so once that supply was slowed down, it slowed down all throughout the U.S. Once it opened up, it was the floodgates opened up. And
That's
so
amazing.
we know
It's a
that it's a
pretty
global.
simple
It's
program,
a pretty
right?
simple. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it is. So supply is certainly, attacking a supply chain is key. The foreign terrorist organizations changes everything, and I'll tell you why. Because prior to that, it was really just a law enforcement problem. Law enforcement going after these groups.
Local law enforcement.
No, federal law enforcement, DEA, FBI, Homeland Security, Marshals.
In the U.S. or?
In Mexico and throughout the United States. Now it's a national security issue. So it elevates it to pretty much every agency. So national security means all of our intelligence. It means the military. It means all law enforcement. So that means that...
Is there less hamstringing with that?
Yes, it means more authorities,
Okay.
more capacity, more coordination. It becomes a whole of government approach to solving a problem.
Okay.
So Department of Defense's budget is, I think, somewhere around $700-800 billion a year. That's not Department of Defense. Wait, no. Yeah, Department of Defense. So what you're saying, make this clear. Previously, it was DOJ. Now it's DOD and DOJ.
It is DOD, DOJ. It is Intel, the whole intelligence community. It became a strategic priority for the nation. Prior to that, it wasn't the number one strategic priority. Clearly, Russia, Iran, North Korea,
Yeah.
China, those
Ukraine,
were.
yeah.
Now it's the Mexican cartels, and it's a game changer. There's no question about it. We'll see where it lands within the next 2 to 3 years, but if I had to predict what's going to happen, you're going to see a dramatic change.
That's great. A whole generation is getting wiped out.
Right.
That's really what
Yeah.
it is. If you go, as you're aware of in Virginia and the DA headquarters and the wall of fentanyl,
Right.
all the photographs, it's a generation.
Yes, it is. I mean, on that wall, we would see babies,
Yes.
right? All ages.
Yes.
3 months up to over 80.
Yes.
And all walks of life,
Yeah.
Yes.
right? Not one community, every community.
And I think it's important to kind of end on that topic, if that's okay,
Yeah,
Paul.
please.
One is, I want to be sure to say, because not everybody knows this, but that there's a national number, 988, for anybody that might be experiencing a mental health crisis or an emergency or really needs to talk to somebody, dial 988. It's an incredible system throughout the country. And then also when we talk about, you have founded this organization and you want to build a movement, and again, that's state, local, federal, schools, families, churches, synagogues, whatever, everybody becoming more informed about this, is for families like your family and everything that you're doing. There are families all over the country that are trying to make a difference, and that's a healing tool for people. It's a healing tool.
It is.
And when you talk about your life was exploded and the trauma of that, it's powerful to know I'm not helpless. There's something that I can do, and I feel like that's our moral obligation as an organization to be sure that we keep that in mind, and that is part of the foundation, which I know you feel the same way.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's been an honor. We could talk for many more hours, but Harold, thank you. It's been
welcome.
a joy to get to know you a little bit in the last few months. And advisory board members, Debbie and Ray, it's always great to learn and to be with you. And thank you for watching this episode of United Against Fentanyl's Thought Leadership Series.